I don't want
to have the balance.
I don't want to pat myself on the back fantasy-wise, but I will. You guys have heard the statistic before because I brag about it in the sports department all the time. I got Carson Palmer with my very last pick this year. Now, given the people I'm playing, they don't live in the state of Arizona, so they maybe had a little bit of an advantage.
Yeah, maybe.
But, man, you're absolutely right. You said number one heading into this week. I mean, the guy's just putting up numbers. The unfortunate thing, as you mentioned, is when he's putting up those incredible fantasy numbers, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate to a Cardinals win.
Well, the difference is turnovers. You know, if he puts up those kind of yards and doesn't throw an interception, that's a whole other story. Yeah. That was a difference last week, and the difference in both of their losses.
That's another thing I'm seeing that's going to happen tonight. I feel like the Cardinals defense is going to get back to that takeaway defense we've seen. And I think they're going to win the turnover battle, and that is why I think it's going to be a pretty convincing one.
You know what? We keep talking about this team, and listen, all the guys, the coach, the players we're talking about, we haven't stayed focused for 60 minutes, and we haven't finished games. And Coach Arians was talking about it this week. We've got to stay focused. We can't have a 4 or 5 minute lull in the game, or 2 minutes here and 3 minutes there, because it's the NFL. Teams are too good, and so we just can't have that. So they're focused on trying to stay focused in the game for 60 minutes, which is huge tonight for them, especially on Monday night in front of the hometown crowd.
Well, they didn't stay in a haunted hotel this week, so that's a positive.
That's true.
That's a positive.
They were home in bed.
And here's another stat for you, though, as far as getting pressure on Joe Flacco, which is important. Joe Flacco has completed a league worst 42% of his passes against the blitz this year.
Wow.
And the Cardinals blitz the fourth most out of any team in the NFL. So, again, without Alex Okafor, their blitz is a little less effective, but still, expect James Betcher to dial up the blitz early and often. It's a no-brainer. It doesn't matter if you know what's coming if you can't stop it.
What concerns me is James Betcher, and that's the thing that Tyrann Mathieu said last week after that Steelers loss, was that the calls changed in the second half.
Yeah.
And so I think there was I asked Calais this week. I went up to Calais and said, did the calls change in the second half? Well, you know, we always make halftime adjustments, and so I don't know. I could be throwing something out there that has no factual base, but it seems like there was some concern among the players about calls that were changed in the second half against the Steelers.
Now, of course, it was a bit of a different circumstance when you got your third-string quarterback coming in for the Steelers.
Right.
Now,
why didn't you put pressure on him?
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Jones, for God's sake.
That's what it seemed like. They pulled back a little bit. They didn't put a lot of pressure on the quarterback and focused on Le'Veon Bell.
Right.
But as you said, that's a change in defensive strategy at halftime when you were mostly dominating the game in the first half.
You don't have to get too cute with your play calling. I mean, it doesn't matter if the Ravens know you're going to try to burn them deep. It doesn't matter if you can still do it, right? Even if they know what's coming. It doesn't matter if the Ravens think you're going to blitz if they can't stop the blitz.
Right.
Yeah.
So stick to your game plan. Don't overthink things. You're the better team. Just go out there and do what you do best.
And it's always tough when you lose a great defensive coordinator like Todd Bowles.
Yeah.
He's got the Jets playing well. They had a chance yesterday against the Patriots. They lost, but Todd Bowles was one of those unique guys. And now you switch to James Betcher, and the players, they've got to make adjustments. And they even talked this week about we don't really have an identity yet as a team, and we're trying to develop that identity. And so I would hope it's just smash mouth football. We just come out and defensively, we just come after you and put the pressure on you.
Yeah, we've had a conversation earlier this season where is the Cardinals defense the new Legion of Boom? And for a while there, I believe that was after the week where they had 6 turnovers. Yeah. But, I mean, it's one where, they have the potential. They're just not necessarily being consistent. But they have the talent, man. Yeah. They do. And that secondary is one of the greatest secondaries in the NFL right now. One of the most fun secondaries
they believe they are.
To watch. Yeah.
They believe, those guys believe they are.
Again, I know we harp on this all the time, but it's so important. It comes down to turnovers. The two big things in both the Cardinals losses, they were -3 in the turnover department. They got to put the pressure on Joe Flacco. If he beats him, he beats him. Like Nick Foles did a few weeks ago. If that happens, so be it. But you got to try to force him into mistakes. And the other thing we haven't talked about a lot is Justin Forsett for the Ravens. Right. He's kind of quietly become an elite running back. They've forgotten all about Ray Rice in Baltimore because of Forsett, and so you got to contain him as well. And you do that, and you force the Ravens to become a one-dimensional team, more likely to get, especially against that blitz, that Flacco's going to make mistakes.
Hey, you put together a graphic, the quarterback battle tonight, Joe Flacco's stats and Carson Palmer's stats. If we can throw that up, guys, let's take a look at the two quarterbacks. And really, when you look at things, There's the biggest difference I see, the glaring difference, is obviously the touchdown to interception ratio, but then the quarterback rating.
Yeah. Quarterback rating's the best in the NFL right now.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
106.9.
Carson Palmer's best ever quarterback rating in the season, if I remember right off the top of my head, was 101.
Wow.
Okay, so that begs the question, can he keep up this pace?
Right.
To me, the answer is yes, because has he had weapons around him like this before? In Cincinnati, he had Chad Johnson, T.J. Hushmanzada, which is pretty good, but I don't know if he had this deep a wide receiving core and running backs who can catch the ball out of the backfield as well.
And you know what else? I talked to Larry Fitzgerald the other day, and I just said, Fitz, you got to be excited because you're off to a great start for the first time in years. You finally have this relationship with Carson. It's working. He's throwing to you. Remember last year they didn't throw to Larry in the first few games, and everybody was upset. And Larry's dad was tweeting out, why don't you target Larry once in a while? And he just smiled. He said, "Hey, I'm excited. Things are going well as a team."
Yeah. So. And this is, I'd say, a glaring difference in these two teams is the receiving core. As we said, Cardinals so deep. The Ravens predominantly depend on Steve Smith, and he's banged up right now.
Torrey Smith is gone now,
and he's going head-to-head with one of the greatest cover guys in the league, and that's going to be a huge matchup to watch tonight, Steve Smith and Patrick Peterson. And Patrick Peterson mentioned earlier this week, he's faced him several times. It's one he always looks forward to. It's one that gets chippy. Steve Smith likes it. Likes to throw a little trash talk in there. So that's going to be a really fun matchup to watch.
DeAndre Hopkins is leading him with 52 catches for 726 yards and 5 touchdowns. So receiving yards per game, 121. That's not too bad.
No. Steve Smith missed a game in there as well. The injury.
Yeah.
So. I will say though, as far as the receiving game for the Cardinals, they one guy who's going to be out, I think, today is Darren Fells.
Yeah, it sounds like. Yeah.
So he's been a great weapon. I mean, the Cardinals finally have a tight end to throw to, so we'll see how they do with presumably Jermaine Gresham being the lead tight end, but. Fells has a couple touchdown passes, and he might be missed tonight.
Obviously, I didn't mean to share with people that DeAndre Hopkins is playing for the Ravens, but just looking at the stats where Steve Smith racks up, DeAndre Hopkins is 1, but Steve Smith is just 20 yards behind him, 130 yards per game. So that's, and we even heard Patrick Peterson talk about that this week, how excited he is to face Steve Smith, and he doesn't know what he's going to be saying. And he talks a lot. Patrick tends to talk a little bit, so. We all know that Tyrann Mathieu talks a lot. So it should be kind of a fun.
It's going to be a fun matchup to watch.
Smith has nothing to lose. He said he's going to retire at the end of the season. His team is 1-5. He's going to go out there and just play his rear end off. He's got absolutely nothing to lose at this point. And I'm excited to watch Smith versus Peterson. It should be fun.
And this is one where we could break down the numbers all we want.
Right.
Rating versus rating, touchdowns, interceptions. We put on paper before the Steelers game, what if we did Landry versus Palmer?
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter.
Doesn't matter.
Well, it's just who's going to play any given night.
That's why they play the games.
Absolutely.
To see, man, it's going to be a tough battle. But I mean, it's just that Joe Flacco's a proven veteran. Carson Palmer, proven veteran.
Right.
It's just who's going to outplay each other on a Monday night stage.
And that's the thing. I think it comes down to who wants it more.
Yeah.
It really does. I mean, football is, you can strategize, you can scheme, you can do all the stat comparisons, but when you get out on that field, who's going to, when those lights come on tonight in Monday Night Football, who's going to rise to the occasion?
Yeah.
Is that really, speaking as a former football coach, Craig, is that really a big deal as far as desire? Because my feeling is that talent eventually tends to win out beyond who really wants it more, who goes in more fired up. But is that really a big deal?
Look at the USC Trojans, though.
Yeah, it's a huge deal because all these guys are so talented that the difference between teams and talent right now, when you have 53-man rosters and there's only 32 teams and you've got access to the best football players in the world, the talent level is so minimally different. And yes, there are superstars, there's all-stars, there's Pro Bowl players, but the guys that show up to play, I mean, I just think the Cardinals really let down last week in Pittsburgh when they are the more talented team and the better team, and they just didn't play like
No doubt about it.
So coaching and that motivation, and as Coach Arians always says, it's got to come from the veteran players.
Yeah. And as just mentioned, I mean, we've been watching Pac-12, of course, very closely this year. The USC Trojans are probably the most talented team in the Pac-12.
Gosh.
It just goes to show that does not always translate to wins. It's coaching, it's strategy, it's everything.
Well, and to Craig's point, I'm thinking back to the Territorial Cup rivalry. So many times, the team with a better record, the team that on paper has more talent, doesn't win.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those, and maybe it's a rivalry thing, but You know, does it really come down to who wants it most? I guess that is a factor.
No, I think it is, and clearly this Monday night thing is such a big deal. You can let it get under your skin. It's an extra day of preparation this week, which changes your schedule again, and then it makes a short week next week.
Yeah.
Thank goodness it's at Cleveland.
Yeah.
Because they're a mess right now.
Well,
so we'll see on wood.
We'll see.
I do know how strongly you feel about a change of schedule before games, just like the Greenbrier Hotel. Do you think that extra day, just that change, will have any effect?
I asked Carson that. I literally asked him this week. I was out at the facility, and I said, listen, it's a Monday night game. It gives you an extra day. Things change a little bit. You kind of get that bonus practice in, on Wednesday, and then you've got that extra day to sit around. And then you get to Monday, and instead of getting up, having pregame meal, getting taped and playing, you got to sit.
Yeah.
You got to wake up and have breakfast, and then you got to go do something.
Yeah.
So that's always tough. And he said it's just a little bit of a change, but it's not that much.
Yeah.
When you have a change in schedule, though, Craig, do you think it benefits you to be the home team as opposed to having to travel across the country?
Yeah, I think it does.
That's a good point.
Hey, listen, we talked to Russ Bliss earlier. Charlie Krausen joins us now from our sister station, WMAR ABC2 in Baltimore, via Skype. Charlie, thanks for joining us, man. We appreciate taking some time.
Guys, I appreciate inviting me on for this. I've been listening to you guys talk about last week in Pittsburgh with Arizona going on the road east. Listening to you guys talk about the game. It was a surprising loss for the Cardinals, I'll be honest.
It was. And listen, you and I talked earlier this morning, Charlie. I just want to get your take on the Ravens because this team has never been 1-5 to start a season.
Never in the history of the franchise, 20 years now, the Ravens never started this badly. Never under John Harbaugh has it ever been a case where into week 6, week 7, the team's not even thinking about playoffs or positioning at all. They're trying to get through the season right now because the Ravens right now under Harbaugh for the first time ever, you're looking at largely the walking wounded, and this could really play to Arizona's advantage tonight for you guys.
What's your take on the Cardinals? What do you think? I mean, they're coming in here. To me, this is a must-win game for both teams, Charlie.
I think it's interesting you'd say that about the Cardinals there in the Cardinals out west because Seattle has not shined yet so far out west. Cardinals still seem to be the class of the NFC West. The receiving core you guys have, with John Brown and Larry Fitzgerald, of course, Carson Palmer throwing it all over the yard. I told you earlier when we talked, Craig, I might not be as glowing of the Ravens and maybe a little more objective with this. Carson Palmer could have a field day tonight Carson Palmer could have a field day tonight against that Ravens secondary because we learned yesterday that Darius Webb and Kendrick Lewis both out tonight. That's your safety and your starting corner, both out tonight. So Fitzgerald and Brown could really have some fun, as could Carson Palmer.
Let me ask you this, Charlie. I mean, what's kind of the fan take on Joe Flacco's season so far? I mean, he just got that $120 million contract, not exactly playing like a $120 million man. Well, how did the fans view this start for Flacco?
Okay, this is really interesting you would ask this because 1 week in, 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, it was Flacco is not an elite quarterback. How many times have we heard this, right? But then when people began stepping back and they began analyzing the Ravens more objectively with the losses of the trades of Torrey Smith and Anquan Bolden both going to San Francisco, when your number one receiver is a 5'9", 36-year-old retiring NFL veteran, Steve Smith Sr., and that's the only real weapon you've got, fans have begun to give Flacco just a little bit of slack on this year because, frankly, the Ravens lack the weapons to really be competitive and elite in the AFC this year. You look at Denver, you look at New England. I mean, please, would the NFL stop giving New England a reason to do what they're doing? But back to the question regarding the Ravens, I think fans are beginning to give this team a little bit of a break and understand this might be the anomaly of the year and certainly not a change in trend for this franchise.
Charlie, you saw the Cardinals' rush offense, I should say, struggle quite a bit against the Steelers last week. They were limited, I think, 50-some-odd yards. It was really their first bad game on the ground this year. Ravens have a pretty good rush defense of their own. How do you see that playing out tonight?
It's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out because since Terrell Suggs went down in week 2, they really struggled to find that guy to step in. C.J. Mosley seems to be the guy right now for the Ravens on that rush side. He's linebacker. He seems to be right now where everything's centered around with him, but he's a second-year, third-year guy. I mean, he's not. It's surprising to have him thrust in that role right now, but the past 2 games, even though one of those games has been a loss, that loss in San Francisco, he has responded well.
You know what, Charlie? You think of the Ravens and you think of defense. I mean, I think of Ed Reed and Ray Lewis and Terrell Suggs. Who is that guy? I mean, who is the emotional kind of leader on that defense right now?
To be determined would be the best answer I could give you for that right now, because it's something that's really happened. Because Ladarius Webb, when Suggs went down, the next man up idea, then it was the idea that and let's be honest here, since Reed retired or went on to the Jets, or excuse me, Houston, and then retired after that, I mean, the Ravens have not had a free safety. You give Kendrick Lewis all the credit in the world for trying. He ain't going to be Ed Reed. Let's be honest here, guys. But that guy, that sort of anchor in the middle, I go back to C.J. Mosley. That's about the best answer we have right now, because there was the thought maybe Ladarius Webb would ascend into that role as the veteran guy, and now he's out, he's hurt.
All right, you're an Arkansas grad, you're an SEC guy. Joe Flacco is going to face this LSU secondary tonight.
Right. Good luck with that. Look, when you've got the Honey Badger and Patrick Peterson and Rashad Johnson, for that matter, have fun with that, because I mean Joe Flacco's thrown for 1,600 yards so far this year, 8 touchdowns and 7 picks. And I was looking at your stat sheet earlier. I think Peterson has 2 picks so far, and Johnson's got 3. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's again, as I said with Carson Palmer. Your secondary may have some fun tonight too. I do believe, as we're saying, guys, I do believe Arizona is the better team.
Now, I will say this, in talking to the players this week, Charlie, all the Cardinals players said the Ravens team is better than 1-5. They're better than their record.
Okay, now this is something, I do a show every week with Justin Tucker, the kicker for the Ravens, and he and I have different conversations on camera than off, and he's really more candid. But he pointed this out to me before the show, and I'm just going to throw these numbers at you. I'm not going to get heavy in the stats. 6, 4, 4, 3, and 5. That is the margin of defeat in all 5 of the Ravens' losses. And Tucker pointed out to me, in 4 of those 5 losses, they were driving at the end of the game with a chance to score, and obviously in this case take the lead and the win. He said you pick up 2 of those, 3 of those, people see the Ravens very differently. And I think it's a good analysis that you would say from the Cardinal players out there, that Baltimore is better than 1-5, but the bookies see it as Arizona better. They're a 9-point favorite.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
What record, I mean, I'll put you on the spot, what record do you see them as? What record would best describe the quality of team this Baltimore Ravens are?
3-loss team. They're a legitimate 3-loss. They're 3-3 team. They're a 3-3 team. I mean, Justin Forsett didn't come along until about 2 or 3 games ago. That Pittsburgh game was his first sort of coming out game. They don't have a solid core of receivers. You've got Steve Smith Sr., who himself just came back from injury. Chris Givens, Kamari Aiken, Jeremy Johnson. They don't have that guy. Torrey Smith was that guy last year. Super Bowl year, it was Smith and Anquan Bolden and Jacoby Jones, for that matter. That guy, with the exception of Steve Smith, is not there.